Hi, my name's Dan, and I finished last in my fantasy football league. Welcome to punishment season. With the draft behind us, it's time to check on my fellow last place finishers to see if they've completed, or in my case, started, their punishments. Really, you should have video on that, but that's on you. As a reminder, I've been tasked with providing weekly videos on all things fantasy football. So where do I start? I'm going to start by giving you 5 players from this year's draft class that I think will have an impact on their team season this year. Now, I'm going to focus on offensive skill players. I know some of you probably play in leagues where you select defensive players. But if you're nerdy enough to play in one of those leagues, you shouldn't be listening to me. So let's start right at the top of the draft with Fernando Mendizzle. Yes, I said Mendizzle. Yes, I know it's Mendoza. Deal with it. Yes, I know the Raiders signed Kirk Cousins, so they could put Mendoza behind the grizzled vet for a year for him to learn. But when has that ever worked for a team? The Bears tried it twice. First, by signing Mike Glennon so Mitch Trubisky could learn behind him for a year, only for Trubisky to start in week 5 because he was clearly the better quarterback, which isn't saying a lot. And then tried it again with Justin Fields sitting behind Andy Dalton, only for Fields to quickly take over the starting job that year as well. Now, I know the Bears aren't the best example of quarterback development, and Kirk Cousins is a lot better than Mike Glennon, but that doesn't mean it'll work. Now, I know what you're going to bring up. It has worked for the Packers. Yes, it has. With Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love. And it also worked for the Chiefs, putting Patrick Mahomes behind Alex Smith for a year, even though Mahomes did play the last game of the season and shined, and they realized just how good he was. So I'm not saying it can't work, but those were established starters on good teams that weren't picking first in the draft. The highest of those draft picks was Mahomes, and the Chiefs moved up to grab him because they knew just how good he could be. So don't be surprised if come week 5, Fernando Mendoza is starting for the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost said Los Angeles. I clearly said Los Angeles. Numero 2, Jeremiah Love. I anticipate we all picked Jeremiah Love to be the feature back at Arizona once they took him 3rd overall in this year's draft. While running backs have been taken early, such as Ginty last year or Bijan in 2023, it's still a rarity to take a running back this early in the draft in today's modern NFL. In fact, there's some first-round drafts where no running backs were taken at all. So if you take a guy this early, you've clearly not just penciled him in, but inked him in as your starting running back, which isn't great news for anyone who picked up Algier in the offseason. Now, Algier will still see time on the field and will likely vulture a few touchdowns from Love once they get to the goal line. But the Cardinals need a spark on offense for at least as long as they need to figure out who's going to play QB for them, and if Marvin Harrison Jr. can actually be the stud that many thought he would be. Number 3, Carnell Tate. Speaking of Ohio State wide receivers, Carnell Tate joins Harrison as the first wide receiver off the board at number 4 in the draft. Now, the Titans are hoping that Carnell Tate's career has a better start than Harrison's has, as that will mean that there's been significant improvement on their offense, development from Cam Ward, and an improvement on that 3-14 record from a year ago. Lining up opposite a healthy Calvin Ridley should allow Tate to find a rhythm early, but his success is really dependent on Cam Ward's development as a QB. Number 4, Ty Simpson. Bet you weren't expecting that one. At the top, I said players that will impact their team this season. I didn't say it would be a good impact. And to be honest, this isn't on Simpson himself. He may or may not turn out to be a great quarterback. This is on the Rams for creating an odd situation that I think was unnecessary. I mentioned both the Packers and the Chiefs have found success by drafting a quarterback to sit behind an established starter on a good team. But coming off a conference loss with an MVP season from your current starter, I have to wonder if there were better options for them this year. You still need to go through the defending champs just to win your division, let alone go further in the playoffs. Wouldn't you have been better served by finding a player that would actually help you this season? And why couldn't you have dropped further back in the draft and select him later in the first round? And ultimately, do you really think Ty Simpson is better than any player that's coming out in next year's draft? It's supposed to be loaded. Personally, I think if they don't win it all this year, this was not a smart move. Number 5, Max Clair. Bet you weren't expecting a tight end taken in the second round to be on my list, but I like to mix it up a little. And I think Max Clair has to play well for the Rams that I just talked about for their Ty Simpson play to make sense. They already have Puka and Devontae as a threat at wide receiver. But their tight end production wasn't the greatest, and a pass-catching tight end like Max Clair could help make their passing attack that much better. Clair led a bad Purdue team in yards and receptions in 2024, which gave him an opportunity to go to Ohio State, where he finished third in yards and receptions behind Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. So clearly, Clair can be the threat over the middle that the Rams could really use to make their Ty Simpson play work out. So what do you think? Am I showing the insight necessary to help myself crawl out of the basement of my fantasy football league? Or am I just proving why I'm there in the first place? I could pretend that I spent hours upon hours doing research for these selections. But let's be honest, you don't have to do research to finish last.